Okay. We're having issues with YouTube, but we are recording via Zoom, and then we will post the recording on YouTube as soon as that issue resolves. So it is 5:31, and I am now calling the August 29th, 2022 special meeting of the Clover Park School District Board of Directors to order. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we will now go to public comments. So just a few reminders. The Board of Directors welcomes public participation and civil engagement. Members of the audience may comment on items related to this agenda only because it's a special meeting. And we will hear public comment this evening for a maximum of 60 minutes. Please do not make remarks of a negative nature singling out a specific employee other than the board and its secretary. If you want to give public comment and you're in person, please fill out a comment card. If you are virtual, please put your name in the chat. We will call on people in the order that we received the cards or the virtual requests. You'll be given 3 minutes for public comment. If you desire a response, please either add your address or email to the card or put it in the chat. If you don't feel comfortable putting it in the chat, please email the superintendent's office with that information. If the time for public comment expires, you may send your written comments to the superintendent's office and they will be distributed to the board of directors for our review. So we will get started. Okay. All right, we're missing a few numbers, so they might be out in the crowd, but we're just going to go with what we have. Sherry Arkell.
Hi, I'm Sherry Arkell, and I live in Lakewood. The preamble to the United States Constitution begins with "We the people." With those words, it is declared that the Constitution derives its power from the people themselves. Every 10 years, a census mandated by Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution is conducted. Our founders created this census to benefit our communities. The results of the census help determine the apportionment of representatives must be carried out so citizens living in communities receive their fair share of representation. The redistricting issue before us today was explained in detail at the August 22nd school board meeting. As mandated by federal and state laws, elected school board directors must represent geographical areas nearly equal in population as possible. Davis Demographics was retained by our school district to examine the new census data and to create redistricting scenarios if found to be needed. They were to be created based on data and facts. This task was given to them as a blind study without the name of our school board directors attached to the 5 geographical areas being examined. This was done to ensure impartiality. As a result of this independent study, District 5 was found to be majorly out of sync with the other 4 districts in terms of fair representation for our Lakewood citizens. This can be corrected. The goal is to create districts where the variance between the populations in our 5 districts is as low as possible. 3 redistricting scenarios were presented to the board. Scenario number 3 is the option with the lowest variance and the one that best represents our community. The numbers do not lie, nor were politics or personal friendships inserted into the formula used to determine fair representation for the citizens of Lakewood. Any school board member who truly represents we the people and who respects our Constitution and federal and state laws would never turn a redistricting plan that had undergone a fair and independent review into a political conspiracy. Any attempt to politicize this redistricting process should be a red flag to all citizens in the city of Lakewood. I ask every school board director to keep your personal politics out of our school district. Those outside of our city inserting themselves into this redistricting decision based on their politics and our personal relationships with board members have no business doing so. I expect every director on our school, Clover Park School Board to select the redistricting option that creates the lowest variance of representation between districts. This is when you actually go on record for standing up for we the people of Lakewood or not. Thank you.
Do we have any virtual? No. Okay. Rich Wall.
I yield my time to Mr. John Orbini.
Okay, when we get there, John will get 6 minutes. Sandy Wall.
I believe that this session is not a viable forum for public comment for the following reasons. One was the unrealistic short notice of the meeting. It was in the Suburban Times Saturday morning of this week before this Monday meeting, which gives somebody very little time to research and do intelligent comment. Also, the subject of the meeting was not included. So the public was not even alerted to the subject and the importance of it to the community. I went then to the agenda to find out what would be covered since I had been out of town for a week. And I read, whereas the district administration has recommended that the board utilize option 3, a copy of which is attached as Exhibit A. It wasn't there, no place to be found. How can we educate ourselves if the exhibit for what is recommended by the administration is not there? Next, I read, whereas the board desires to utilize option 3 out of the 3 that have been recommended by the demographics organization. And I think, oh, so what did I miss? When did they debate this? When did they decide out of the 3 options to choose number 3? So I go to the video. No, and that was of the last meeting where this came up. Nowhere is that issue discussed by the board. And yet it says here, whereas the board desires to utilize option 3. And supposedly we were only given an attachment for option 3. We have no opportunity to look at option 1 and 2. And did the board discuss option 1 and 2? No, that wasn't on the video either. And lastly then, and this is not a quote, it's just kind of a summary because we've had so little time to prepare. So in viewing the video, I see that the board president said something to the effect that option 3 is preferred because it provides the lowest variance, and that's the way things have been done in the past. All 3 options had variances which were in the realm of acceptance. So why can't we discuss 1, 2, and 3?
Thank you. I'm 3 minutes. Tanisha Lyons.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Awesome. Good evening, board. My name is Tanisha Lyons, and I'm a community advocate here in the city of Lakewood. And I am calling in because I am requesting that you approve option 3. So far, out of all the people who have spoken this evening, none of them live in zone 5. And 1, we know that the census has showed that there's significant growth in the city of Lakewood. 2, that the BIPOC populations are growing in the city of Lakewood. And 3, that voting for option 3 would not only allow proper representation in Zone 5, but it would make sure that we would have somebody who within our district who can represent us and not just a small section representing a far right group. So anyhow, I am hoping that the school board does vote to approve option 3. Thank you.
John Arvini, so you'll have 6 minutes.
John Redistricting Lakewood resident. There are 3 major issues I want to address. First off is the meeting itself, this meeting itself, redistricting plans, and the systemic issues of Clover Park School District's voting system. I have to agree with Sandy Wall's assertion that proper notice was not given. It's required by RCW 4230.080 that the time, place of the special meeting and the business to be transacted is in a notification. That didn't occur. Option 3 in Exhibit A was not there. Shouldn't all 3 options be presented to the public so legitimate comparison could be made between them? That didn't happen. And there was a choice, apparently, on the 22nd to only include option 3. That only occurs with a vote, and you haven't had the vote on 1, 2, or 3. And lastly, it stated that the district administration has recommended that the board utilize option 3. Well, it's my understanding only the superintendent has the authority to make recommendations to the board, and he recently was responsible for a race-based complaint against the one person, Director Wegman, whose position would be out-districted. It seems to me that Superintendent Banner should recuse himself from endorsing any of the options. Now let's take a look at redistricting plans. Policy 1105P1 specifically states that the district boundaries coincide with existing recognized natural boundaries and will, to the extent possible, preserve existing communities of related and mutual interest. Yet that was never really addressed in the presentation. What it did include were ill-defined maps, the district boundaries of which are not distinct, and omitted the home address of each of the present board members. In fact, no name was mentioned as to who actually was going to be displaced. There was no discussion of preserving the existing communities and mutual interests to include things like census tracts, number of districts required. They just assumed it was 5. Perhaps it needs to be greater to accommodate the distinct variations we have in our neighborhoods. There was nothing mentioned about the school location or student demographics, political precincts, historical community names and boundaries, or voting trends. None of that was discussed, none of it was mentioned. And yet those are things that have to be considered by the public in terms of whether they support these options. Essentially, it was just a collection of numbers with no justification. They are simply not enough information on the single option, let alone the 3 options. Now, the most important point, I think, in my thinking, is the Clover Park School voting system. Policy 1105P1 states that your choice of a voting system cannot dilute or abridge the rights of voters who are members of a protected class or classes. Yet that is exactly what your voting system does. And it does it through at-large voting. If you want to represent your districts, then have your districts vote for their individual district member. Without it, moving the boundaries is problematic. It doesn't solve anything. It doesn't create a greater ability of protected classes to express themselves politically. And in fact, at-large voting guarantees high voting, high socioeconomic white neighborhoods get to elect their choice of the board of directors. Indeed, the campaigns of board members are focused on where the votes are. All campaigns are focused that way. Well, who gets the short shrift of all this money and doorbelling? Those areas, typically low income, typically protected class, who aren't visited. As an example, David Anderson doorbelled 10,000 homes. He could have done it 4 times over in Tillicum if he was elected by the people of that district. In point of fact, it's probably a reason people in these districts don't vote. They're bypassed by the political process. The only way you change that is to put the person who they elect responsible to them. When you make everybody responsible for everything, nobody winds up being responsible for anything. In essence, the current system institutionalizes systemic discrimination against protected classes. You have failed to give proper notice to the meeting. You have failed to address the 3 options and the underlying data, or address the systemic discrimination that is part of your voting system. Thank you.
Jennifer Healy.
I yield my time to Rebecca Weisenhouse.
Marilyn George.
Good evening. My name is Marilyn George. I am a resident of Lakewood. I am pleased to have this opportunity to speak to you concerning the redistricting issue. Your August 22nd meeting was excellent in giving us the details about why the geographical areas for board members needed to be changed in order to create fair representation for our Clover Park District citizens. I approve of the process you went through to determine what was needed based on facts. I want to go on record for supporting the option that honors the best representation for our citizens. Option 3 gives citizens the best representation. If changes need to be made, let's do the right thing and make them happen. I have witnessed what seems to be a political move to take over our school district, and I do not want politics involved in your board decisions. Thank you.
No, virtual. Mandy Candler.
Can you hear me? I'm kind of tall. I am a Lakewood citizen, lived here a long time. I'm going to start with a quote from Harry Lang. Do what's best for the kids. He said that to my husband. I know 4 of you board members. I helped with the school board campaign for one in 1995, 27 years ago, and your main goal was to improve test scores. Another, I volunteered in your 2nd grade classroom. So I've been here a long time. But this is not personal. This is about procedures and practices to uphold and improve our school district performance and the full education of all of its students so that they can succeed. I am not a political person. I'd rather be out enjoying our summer evening like you probably would too. I support 2 of your board members in their quest to be laser focused on Clover Park students' path to success, life success, academic success. Shouldn't we all do that? This redistricting process is flawed and not well thought out, and nor does it follow school board policy. The notifications are not in compliance, as was already mentioned, and the voting options by the board were not followed. but I will leave you with this. Procedure 1105-P1, Director Districts of your board policy states, any registered voter residing in an area affected by the redistricting plan may request review of the adopted local plan by the Pierce County Superior Court within 15 days of the plan's adoption. I just say, if you adopt number 3 redistricting tonight, there will be a consequence by the 60+% of voters who elected Paul Wagaman to office. And I thank you for your time.
Rebecca Weisenhouse.
Last Monday, August 22nd, you were presented with information from Parker Howe, from Porter Foster Rourke LLP, and Christopher Melendez from Davis Demographics. During the presentation, you were given 3 options for redistricting. My first question to you is, why wasn't Davis Demographics capable of giving you 3 options that would not have redistricted any of our school board members? My second question, why was Davis Demographics specifically led by district officials or employees to include options that would intentionally put Director Paul Wagaman out of his district? During his presentation, Parker Howe said the representation of how many people are voting for each school board director should balance out to each citizen having an equal right to influence who is elected. That becomes important because the Supreme Court has interpreted that to mean that states have to make an honest and good faith effort to construct districts as nearly of equal population as practical. The question then arises, what does nearly equal in population as practical mean? The U.S. Supreme Court has a number of cases that look at different numbers and different percentage variations between populations and say either thumbs up or thumbs down. Quote from Parker, the general rule of thumb that the Supreme Court has come up with is that if you are under a 10% deviation, that's a minor deviation, and that should typically withstand challenge. That's an actual quote. Parker then went on to say the court has said that variations up to something like 16% might be almost in the realm of reasonable, so there is probably some amount, slight over 10 and less than 16, that could be something that would pass muster. So given all this information, all 3 options are legal and acceptable. Later in the meeting, Alyssa, you said that at tonight's meeting, you were going to discuss option 3 since it was recommended due to being the lowest variance. My next question, who recommended it? At the end of the meeting, you said again, just so we are clear, we are going with option 3 on Monday night. Why was option 3 predetermined and by whom? Why the push to redistrict Paul Wagaman out of his district when there is another option that is fully legal and within the boundaries to keep him in his district? In his last election, Director Wagaman was elected into office by 6,225 people, receiving 61.41% of the vote. In comparison, in that same year, Director Jacobs was elected by 5,830 people, receiving 58.48% of the vote. Director Wagaman had 400 more votes than Director Jacobs. In further comparison, in your last election, Director Anderson Pearson was elected by 4,839 people, receiving 53.23% of the vote. Director Wagaman received 1,400 more votes than Director Anderson Pearson. That's a 25% difference. It is clear that the majority of the voters in this district support Director Wagaman, having elected him to this position 3 times. It is clear that redistricting Director Paul Wagaman out of his district is not, I repeat, not the will of the people. This is clearly a personal attack that is politically motivated. Until Director David Anderson came along last December, Director Wagaman was the only school board director pushing academic excellence and questioning why our academic numbers continue to decline, except for graduation rates, which we still don't have an answer to. He has been censored twice by directors Anderson, Pearson, Jacobs, and Belize because you deliberately took his words out of context and used bias simply because his values don't align with yours. You have consulted with professionals who have a conflict of interest to push the censor. To this day, when Director Wagman speaks, directors Anderson, Pearson, and Jacobs show their unprofessionalism by stopping, laughing, rolling their eyes, and making insulting and snarky comments. It is clear that directors Anderson, Pearson, Jacobs, and Belize want Director Wagman out. You know, based on public voting record, that he will be reelected again, and this is your one and only way to take him out. This is clearly a political hit job. Director Anderson Pearson, within the last year when you were running for re-election, you publicly stated that, quote, you weren't a politician and that you were just a lifelong Lakewood resident wanting to give back and improve our district, unquote. Redistricting Director Wagman is not the will of the people and does not improve our district. Furthermore, you stated, quote, I'll continue to do everything I can to continue to move the district forward, unquote. Redistricting Director Wagman does not move the district forward. Neither does your voting record against improving academic excellence. You also publicly stated, quote, the school board shouldn't be political, unquote, but as board president, you've done nothing but push your political ideology on this district. Another public statement from you, quote, I made a promise to myself that I would choose kindness and remain respectful, even when I didn't get the same in return, unquote. Do you really consider your behavior towards directors Wagman and Anderson respectful? So are you as a board going to vote on an option that truly represents the will of the people in our district, or are you going to choose an option that suits your own personal agenda? Actions speak louder than words. And I have this handout from Parker. This was a screenshot of the 3320 mark, I believe it is, on Zoom, where it says state apportionate plan with maximum population deviation under 10% is a minor deviation. So here's a copy for all of you.
I do see someone's hand raised. It looks like Valerie. If you want to put your name in the chat box, that's how we're keeping track of the public comment. So if you want to speak, please put a comment in the chat box. And then we will go to the next in person and see.
Where's the chat box out here?
Oh, no, sorry, that was virtual. You can bring them.
Oh, here.
Sorry, to clarify, the chat box being virtual. If you want to speak virtually, please put your name in the chat. Okay, we'll go to in person and then back to virtual. So Lisa Olson.
Can I move the mic or is this okay? My name is Lisa Olson. I'm a Pierce County resident. Redistricting Paul Wagaman is not in the best interest of our community, especially the students. Paul cares about the students and their success. It's been shown he wants the students to be outstanding young adults. So he's concerned about the academics. Redistricting Paul would be a loss for the students of Clover Park School District. Also, plenty of people living in District 5 today have spoken here. So the person who stated otherwise may have been wrong here. You might want to check into that. Also, she may have ran in the last election against Director Wagaman and she lost significantly. Is this a conflict of interest? Please work on the best interests of the children. I mean, they're our future. I've been to multiple board meetings here in this district, and it's concerning to me. What Rebecca said about the eye rolling is true. I've witnessed it. In fact, it happened tonight. So I would love to see the best interests of the youth so that they can lead our community. Thank you.
Valerie, virtually. So your 3 minutes will start when you start to speak.
Hello?
Hello, we can hear you, so your 3 minutes.
Oh, hi. Okay. Hi. I just wanted to put something in here that's not emotional. It's not having to do anything with politics. And believe me, we have heard about the politics. So the importance of following the Constitution and the Washington Voting Act is really important to me. This redistricting wasn't done capriciously, but it's following Washington RCW 28A 343048. That's out of the hands of our school board. In our district, they had the responsibility to follow that and prepare that, because under RCW 4405030, they must respond with redistricting within 8 months following a census. It isn't up to them whether this is done or not. It is the law. And I wanted to say one thing. I am from District 5, and I did vote for Paul Wagaman, but we have 4 members in our family that will not vote for him again. And I would like him to add, why do you not release the 26 pages that had to do with your issue with Mr. Banner? I mean, that's up to you to release. I think people should be able to read that. That's all I have to say.
We now go to Liz Scott.
Hello, my name is Liz Scott, and I live in Lakewood in the Clover Park School District. And I've noticed people are supposed to be saying what school district they're in, and it would be nice if that was enforced, since I think there are a lot of people from far out of the school district speaking as if they are in this one. I want you to thank you for allowing us to comment on redistricting tonight. I watched the previous board workshop where Mr. Howell and Mr. Menendez went over the state and federal laws and the process and requirements involved in redistricting. It is obviously a nuanced and complicated process, and I trust the board to take the information provided and come up with the most equitable and legally required scenario. If that means that a director is redistricted out, then that is the way it goes. Based on previous Washington case law, as they described, being more than a 7.6% variance could be overturned by the courts in Washington. So Washington is stricter than that federal requirement that was mentioned and brought up. Anyway, I encourage you to pick scenario 3. Thank you.
Tim Healy.
So I want to just briefly talk about the minority on this board, Mr. Wagman and Mr. Anderson. You know, I've been present at board meetings, and based upon, you know, what I've observed and heard is, you know, they believe in parental rights. It's clear to me that they believe that kids should be, you know, judged based upon competence, character, academics.
All right, it's just confirming that the public comment has to be related to the redistricting. So it's just confirming that.
Mr. Wagner and Mr. Anderson believe kids should be judged based upon competence, character, and academics. And it's also clear to me that the majority, Ms. Anderson, Pearson, Ms. Jacobs, Mr. Velez, oppose them with respect to change, as to policies, and with respect to procedures, and regarding subject matter. It's also clear to me that the majority has attempted to impact Mr. Wagman's electorate by censuring Mr. Wagman, in my view, improperly, not once, but twice. And now it's clear to me, and I believe it's clear to many, notwithstanding what this board or the majority represents, but it's clear to us that the majority is now seeking to remove Mr. Wagner from the ballot completely. And I submit that's really what this is about, notwithstanding the census. The census is a tool, a vehicle that's being used. And I submit that this board is utilizing its counsel and is utilizing this variance argument clearly as a pretext. It's wrong. It's improper. And Mr. Wagman's voters object, and I object.
Okay, Mike Hill.
Good evening, Mr. Banner, school board members. I'm Mike Arkell. I live in Lakewood. I'm part of the Clover Park School District. I just wanted to welcome the chance to share with you tonight that I think that all school board members should set aside their personal politics and use the information that was given by the Davis demographics to guide your decision on the redistricting options. We've made clear that the law intends for census data to be used for fair representation in the community. As elected officials, you are required to represent all the citizens of this community. As school board members, you should be asked to set aside your personal politics in order to serve the people you represent. We presently have an imbalance of representation in the school board districts. This needs to be fixed. At the last board meeting, you were given 3 options to fix the problem. Option 3, in my opinion, was clearly the best. Why should we consider anything other than the best? It's really simple. Follow the rule of law and the data to determine what the best option is, period. Thank you.
Rachel Parks. Oh, sorry, Rachel Parks.
Good evening, board directors. I'm Rachel Parks. I'm a Lakewood and Clover Park resident, teacher, and parent. And I support the recommended option 3 for redistricting with the least variation. I know 1% may not sound like a lot, but that's approximately 900 people. So every percentage is a lot of people being represented. And I think any board director who is no longer in the same district has the option to run in that new district. So nobody is being barred from continuing to represent the Clover Park School District. Thank you.
James Cooper.
James Cooper, a resident of Lakewood, and I am in the school district. First of all, your districts don't represent these guys don't represent the folks in their district. Okay, it's just a number. If they live in the district, they can run, but they don't represent the people in that district. When I was on the board, I asked the question of the board members, do I represent those people in my district? You know the answer I got from the board, to include Carol Jacobs? Oh no, that's not how it works. So you don't represent the people in the district. David got voted in by virtue of those larger districts where most of the people vote. The folks in Telecom, they don't vote. They're not getting any real representation. I mean, from others. I think David does an excellent job of doing that. Your 3 options. I've been in a lot of organizations, and when I brief the boss, or when I got briefed, I got 3 options, and I got the advantages and the disadvantages. Okay, there was no advantages and disadvantages. The only advantages that was proposed is the lowest variant. A big disadvantage is you're going to lose a board member that 61% of the people voted for. Hello? Are you really going to do that? There's 60,000 people in this city that you guys all represent. And you're going to get rid of 1 board member because of the lowest variant? I don't think so. Okay, you got a fight on your hands, and I'll tell you that right now, because that's absolutely wrong. You did not present to the people that I remember the three options, their advantages and disadvantages. We didn't get to see that. Then you put a notice in the paper 2 or 3 days ago that we're going to have this special meeting. Again, you're very wrong. You represent the people of this city. Your job for the RCW is to give them as much notice as possible. This is a very, very important decision you're making by law, and it's important, and it's covered by very many laws and very many stipulations. I'll just read you one thing out of the RCW. 28A 34330. School board directors of director districts from among the residents of the represented district will be elected. Let me back up. Board of directors shall be elected one from each of the director districts from among the residents of the respective districts. That says the residents elect them. You chose the other option at the at-large. So if you did it the other way, okay, the people in Tillicum would be voting for David, and he would represent them.
Anyone else virtual in our comment? We don't have any further comment cards. So we will move forward to our individual action item for tonight. The individual action item is number 22-231, the draft plan for redistricting of internal director districts. Is there a motion to approve? So moved by Director Jacobs. Is there a second? Seconded by Director Velez. Superintendent Banner, can you speak to this?
Certainly, the district has engaged the consultant Davis Demographic to analyze the federal census data and prepare recommendations for revising the internal director districts consistent with policy 1105, procedure 1105P, and federal and state laws. Davis Demographic prepared 3 options for consideration. The district recommends option 3 to the board for adoption. This option provides the least deviation in population between the 5 districts at a maximum population variation of 7.8%. And I recommend approval of this action.
We'll now go to comment. Yes,
I have some preliminary questions. The 22-231 draft plan for redistricting of internal director districts that is before us tonight states in the second whereas paragraph that, quote, the district recently received federal census data, end quote. And my question here of 4 questions is, when did the district receive federal census data?
I think we should probably have Parker and or John Boatman respond.
All right, why don't you go to the next question? Well, oh, do you have it? Okay, yeah. So while he digs that up, and just for everyone's awareness, Parker Howell is here and he is our legal counsel. So,
also in that same paragraph, it is said that the receipt of federal census data and having undergone a legal process to receive territory transfer from Bethel School District triggered the redistricting requirements. But the receipt of federal census data alone would have triggered the redistricting requirements, correct?
yes.
Yeah, good evening, members of the board. Again, my name is Parker Howell, outside legal counsel for the district. As far as Director Anderson's second question, yes, if the territory transfer had happened alone, you have to redistrict within 8 months. The district already had to redistrict by November 15th, regardless, because of the census data. So I think essentially every single school district in the state has that November 15th deadline one way or the other. On the other question, I don't have easily accessible when exactly the district received the census data. I know that we first started getting questions around this in approximately mid-October of 2021. And so it's quite possible the census data had been received around that time, or it came in, you know, it's possible, I guess it could have come in just after that as well, but approximately that time frame or earlier was probably when it was received.
My third question, thank you. From the executive summary regarding school board director redistricting, it is stated that, quote, state law requires each director district to be as nearly equal in population as possible to each and every other school district, among other criteria. RCW 29A 76.010. How many people were added approximately to District 1, which I assume they were placed through the property transfer?
Unfortunately, I don't have an easy answer for that. Christopher Melendez, the Davis demographics consultant, may well know that off the top of his head or easily be able to access the data. I do recall that the number of students was quite low who are in the area that were transferred. Not that students is the measure that's being used here, but I just point that out for the purposes of indicating that the number of people who live in that area is low, is my understanding, because it largely overlaps Joint Base Lewis McChord. So there just isn't a lot of housing on that part of the base necessarily, is my understanding of that, but I don't have the specific numbers.
Just as a reminder, if you have like data-based questions, you could send them ahead of time. That way we could dig them up instead of trying to do it on the spot.
Sure, and the answers are close enough given where I'm going. The fourth question is, so would it not be correct to say that the territory transferred from Bethel School District did not appreciably impact the 5 criteria required by RCW 29A 76.010 (4) for revising Clover Park School District's plan to revise its internal director districts?
Sorry.
That's all right.
Stand up.
Yeah. Well, Director Anderson, I'm not sure quite how to answer that on the appreciably. It certainly impacted it in that the district would violate state law if you didn't now redistrict within 8 months of the territory transfer becoming finalized. You know, regardless of the November 15th deadline that would exist due to the census data being received. In terms of the number of people and where they were situated, my understanding of the data is this imbalance, if you will, where Director District 5 had far and away more population than any of the other 4 director districts, arose, you know, regardless of whether this territory transfer had occurred. It's just something that developed over time.
Great, which leads me to my conclusion, and that is, if I have assumed correctly, that this process of our district revising its internal director districts was not appreciably impacted by the transfer of territory from Bethel School District, and that this process of revising our internal director districts was to begin with the receipt of federal census data, and that the estimated date of having received that data was October a year ago, then this process could have begun much earlier than what we are dealing with now.
Are there any other comments? Okay, Dr. Wegman.
There have been lots of comments tonight that talk about we the people, and you know, who do we represent? Director Anderson and I have asked on multiple occasions, and I've asked before Director Anderson was on this board, if we could have our opportunities to have listening sessions with our community. Now, been voted down 4-1, and now it's 3-2. To me, if we represent people, we should have opportunities to listen to them and to share with them our ideas, hear their ideas, and then if they have good ideas, bring them to this board and hopefully get those implemented in some way of policy. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened. When you look at the intent of our founders, when they talk about equal protection under the law, equal representation, their intent was that it would be equal. In other words, for all human beings. You know, when I ran for the legislature, the 28th district had about 134,000 people. Of that, there were 78,000 registered voters. So you wonder, oh man, it's less, you know, just about half. So what are the other half? Well, their children don't vote. But the sad thing, when you doorbell, you find out there's a lot of people that don't vote. It's just sad. They're not even registered, which is sad to all of us. Sad to me. But we've gone through the whole process to look to how do we make sure that everybody gets heard? How do we do that? Our system that we have set up right now doesn't do that. First off, to get elected, because we get elected from at large, so we have to appeal to the whole school district population to get elected. When some areas in our community, they just kind of give up. They don't think they have a chance. And so to have a chance, how do we do that? To me, that would be each area that is represented by a board member should be elected by those people in that group. That's if I was king for the day, that's what I would recommend. So I checked on that today. I said, could that happen? Could we have? Well, the Voter Protection Act of State of Washington of 2019 basically said boards can choose to do however they want. I talked to Julie Anderson today, candidate for Secretary of State, our current Pierce County auditor. She said, Paul, many people would like to see it happen. She said, there's people standing in line. And she said, if you really want to provide an equitable solution to your communities, she believes that's the answer. In other words, we allow each director area to elect their board member. So, you know, how do we do that? Well, you know, what it means is we have to step back from where we are right now. And the other thing that we should consider as we do that, because I've been on the redistricting and followed the redistricting 10 years ago for the whole state, and Representative Huff and some other people on there, you know, Representative Huff's dead now, but was very interesting. We had, I don't know how many public meetings, and we got a chance to sit down. So the question that Director Anderson asked tonight were handled in workshop sessions where you could ask the person that's running the computer, so we don't have to go secondhand through an attorney. We talk right to the representatives, and it really helped us make those decisions. Unfortunately, you know, several comments that were made tonight, you know, when you work with people, it gets political. There is no choice. How do you not make it political? Because when you have opposing points of view, I like my idea, you like your idea. Is that good or bad? That's just a fact. That's a fact. And so the question is how do we deliberate and make good decisions? I think this particular agenda item on here tonight is inappropriate. I think it's out of order. I think we could call that, because to get something on the agenda, it takes the board vote to do that. And we didn't have that. This was directed at the last meeting by the president of the board. So in other words, how did the president of the board have the authority to do this? It's wrong. It's wrong.
I'd be happy to answer that if you're asking me the question. So if you took my whole statement that I made at the last meeting, we go with the recommendation of the board. This was unique. There was a director getting potentially drawn out of the district. So we didn't move forward with the individual action item for the one recommendation because it needed to be mentioned at the workshop. Then we had a special meeting on it. This special meeting was not required. It was due to the sensitive nature of this issue. So we go with the recommendation. And if you listen to the rest of my statement, I said, feel free to amend the motion. The individual action item on the table is the recommended option, but feel free to make a motion to amend. That was what my statement was.
Okay.
And there was 0 comments in response. So if you had a concern about it, why not bring it up then instead of waiting till today?
Well, I can tell you the reason I didn't bring it up because I was fishing and I was on the Zoom call into this from Canada. Okay, and my little teeny computer screen, it was hard to tell looking at those 3 things. So we really didn't have a chance to have, in my opinion, adequate discussion and a chance to see that. When I've been on redistricting things before for the state of Washington, you got a chance to look at the maps and say, well, we move this line this way, move this line that way. We went down this street. You could do that and you can see it. This board has not done that. It has not done that. We farmed it out to somebody else and
farmed it out. We needed a consultant because we're not experts in drawing lines. The population, we had to hire a consultant. We didn't farm it out. We had to follow state and federal laws. And not, as far as I'm aware, none of us are experts in district boundaries.
Those weren't any of my comments. So if you just let me finish, we need the opportunity to ask questions of the person that moves the numbers, moves the lines, and say, what happens if you did this? What happens if you did that? That's the kind of discussion and thought process that I believe this board should go through, which has not happened. It has not happened. Therefore, I would make a motion that we table this recommendation tonight and look forward to more discussion and bring the map drawer into this room and have us sit down in front of the public and have that discussion.
Second.
All right, there's a motion on the table to table the draft plan for redistricting of internal director districts. And there's a second by Director Anderson. Do you want to have further comments on that, or? I would just comment there are legal deadlines that we're going up against here, so.
Yes, I have a comment, several actually, regarding the opportunity actually that presents itself to the school board and to the residents of the community, to our schools and our students. And that is the one option, number 4, that was not considered in options 1 through 3. A lot of this is not pertinent to that specific matter, but here it is. In the interest of full disclosure, nowhere, for example, in the redistricting briefing, was there or has there been until tonight any mention of a specific board member being displaced from their current district, which apparently options 2 and 3 do, if passed as before us tonight wrongly for the reasons I will state. Director Wagman will not thus be able to run for re-election in 2023. That information, which is an omission, is now public, but should have been stated previously. As earlier established, this process by which we could have addressed the district redrawing of lines could have commenced 1 year ago. The transfer of property from Bethel really was a federal requirement, but we already had a census requirement that preempted the discussion. And here we are up against, as you say, President Pearson against the timeline. However, the deadline is November 15th. And I think the paperwork that should be communicated to the public should reflect the timeline that is available to them, as was mentioned tonight, to have opportunity to go to Superior Court. And it looks like that's a very real possibility given the debate. I think it's valuable to consider that this motion is not appropriate because of the lack of timing, the lack of notification, the fact that in the announcements, though required by law, the purpose of the meeting was not stated, not in the email from the district, not in the Suburban Times. You had to go to an extra link to find any further information, only to find there that information was not comprehensive enough. Options 1, 2, 3 were not there, and option 4 was not as well. And option 4 is a means by which, as has been addressed tonight, and as Director Wagner just addressed, is a means by which we truly represent the EDI component and the emphasis of this district, equity, diversity, and inclusion, such that we have an opportunity in the executive summary to consider option 4. That's part of the material that was presented to us, but never discussed, never proffered, never presented. That we take the challenge here and have our school board directors represent the actual geographical area from which they come. I do not, cannot, it's not possible to represent the voters of Oak Brook as much as it's possible. Clearly, evidentiary, given my 72 years having lived in Telecom, to impact Telecom Elementary School and the parents that live there. That geography is one factor, but the demography, the people, the socioeconomic aspects and characteristics of these people are quite different, we would all agree, than Oak Brook. So we should consider going forward, and the reason for tabling this motion, the option that presents itself for us to be elected by the district that where we live.
We'll just make a few comments. One, it was mentioned at the workshop that the director in District 5 and the options would be moved. So actually, our attorney mentioned that. And then the only other comment I would make is we've known that we had to redistrict. It's been brought up multiple times. We hired the consultant. Not once was it mentioned that you wanted to redraw the boundary or redo how people voted in the city. So we wait till the night that we are voting on the draft plan to mention that option when we've known that we were redistricting. It seems like just due to the way that the lines were drawn and that some are unhappy with it, that now we're going to try to go for a whole nother way of voting. Well, it's a very valid voting option. Why wasn't it mentioned prior to this? We've known we've been in the middle of this process. We hired the consultant. We knew what was happening. We knew the deadline was coming. And I've received 0 emails from anyone, calls, saying that you were interested in this voting in districts rather than at large. So, I mean, this all comes as a surprise.
Yeah. I would like to address the issue of voting in district, and I also took a little time for me to wrap my head around it, but as a board member who lives in Clover Park School District, I may live in District 2, but I do represent all of the citizens in this community, and I do care about them. So it's really up to me to make sure that I understand the needs of schools in District 1, 3, 4, and 5. I know there are some school districts, quite frankly, one of our neighboring, all school board members literally live on the same street. And I think that would be very detrimental to the fact that to have 5 Oakbrook, 5 Tillicum, 5 any from one area be elected. One of the things about making us having our district areas is the fact that we do have an opportunity for every district, because our population is different, to be represented. One of the things that I looked through the stats clearly, I was looking specifically for voting patterns, because we do know that the largest voting package percentage comes from District 2 and 3. But this is not sped up, this is not separated that way. This is separated by population. And I was kind of surprised that it happened, because I didn't realize there was that kind of flex. But the reality is, you know, I was surprised, but this is the outcome of the census. This is not the outcome of a political group. This is not the outcome of a voting base. This is not the outcome of that, other than what the U.S. Census says we have to do. So that's why we have 5 board members elected from 5 areas who represent all students, each child.
Any other comments or move to vote?
Well, I just want to take exception, President Pearson, with your statement that we've known and why now. That's why my opening questions to Reporter Foster concerned when the clock started ticking on the redistricting, only to find out it was a year ago that we could have been discussing this, and we could have had opportunities to debate, and we could have had public forums. The fact that we're up against it tonight, although November 15th, again, is 2 months hence, the lack of planning is not my problem. And secondly, it is direct on the director district's procedure 1105P1. The criteria by which, if a district considers redividing director districts, that's complied in order to comply with federal and state law, that being the census. Opportunities are 3, as presented by our presenters. The criteria are 4, but missing was the opportunity for the board to know that they could use this opportunity in this same document about redistricting to consider electing officers by geographical area, like district director districts. So the fact that that's not considered is very bothersome to me, because it's certainly an option that should be on the table. And I think it's worthy of discussion, even still. That's why this motion needs to pass, that we table this for further deliberation. We are not hamstrung by a deadline yet.
Superintendent Ganner would like to speak.
Yeah, I'd just like to offer a little bit of clarity, because we end up with these insinuations that there was a lack of planning and that the process was not timely. And so I'll look for Parker and or John to provide clarity in this. The census did spark the plan and the process. And when that process started, we found that there were students, due with regard to the land transfer, that Clover Park School District had been serving, yet the county map showed that that was Bethel School District. And so in order for the process to continue with all of the rules around drawing the lines, contiguous lines, etc., we did have to wait until that transfer was completed in order for us to re-engage in the drawing of the lines. And so that land transfer, had its own set of timelines which strung this out as well. And so, John, I know that was before you took your official role, and Rick Ring was still here at the time. Parker, I know that you were also lead counsel on that. And so you can, if I'm wrong, please tell me I'm wrong.
Yeah, so there was quite a bit of delay that happened due to the territory transfer. The district had to negotiate under state statute with the Bethel School District and their attorney and undergo a survey, take a variety of other steps that just kind of drag on and took a number of months. I recall that I gave a presentation to the board, and I'm not exactly sure when that was. It might have been as early as January. There was an overview of both the redistricting and the territory transfer processes that touched on some of the criteria that our presentations last week also touched on. And I believe that one of the things that was mentioned in there was the prospect that a way that you can ameliorate discrimination in voting if it is found to exist. And there hasn't been any allegations or data I'm aware of that suggests that's the case here. But if it does exist, folks can switch their voting system to this at-large system. The issue then becomes most, if not all, of the board members have to run for re-election, and the district still has to do this population balancing process. So the population balancing doesn't go away if you switch to the voting where each person votes for the person who lives in their district, and that person more directly represents those people than perhaps they can be seen to do now.
The point I was trying to establish with the October census having data having been delivered to the district is that, as it turned out, and we knew that, at least the powers that be knew that, the district transfer from Bethel had appreciably little impact upon the potential for where the lines would be drawn. That's the point I was trying to establish. In other words, the redistricting lines could have been set then or later, but shortly thereafter, such that however board consider that Bethel property districting will bring in 30 students and 55 parents or whatever, but it won't appreciably, could have been the statement, affect the lines as to their drawn. But that didn't happen, and that's bothersome to me. So it's not insinuating that somebody didn't do their job. It is rather emphasized, putting the emphasis where it belongs. If we're going to be prepared, if people are going to make a cogent, informed decision, then all the parts should be on the table, one of which is the opportunity that does exist to reframe our entire electoral process, match the system that we extol and highlight, and that is that equity and diversity and inclusion means that the people of Oak Brook don't get to unduly influence elections, because now David Anderson represents Tollegan, and he will do his darndest to make sure that that community and its residents are registered to vote and have opportunity to vote for any candidate in their community that they know will do the best for their students.
I'd say this probably good. Okay, yes.
I'm okay. Well, I think for me, that you need to, in your mind, draw a picture. And if you draw a circle, and inside that circle are all the voters and the students and the parents that belong to Clover Park District. And then you divide that circle into sub pieces. And so for right now, just cut them in pie-sized shapes. And those would be represented by a director, each one. So you'd have 5 pieces of pie inside that circle. The way we're electing them now, you have to live in one of those pie-shaped things before you can put your name on the ballot. but then you have to appeal to everyone in the whole circle to get elected. And that really is an at-large election. That's what it is, a large election. But if we want to hear the voices from the people in the pieces of pie, we should allow each piece of pie to choose who from their piece of pie they would like to represent them. That's, to me, the most equitable way to do. Certainly, Julie Anderson said that to me today. She said, Paul, that is the most equitable way to run the election. It fits the Constitution, it fits the intent of the founders. And so those are the areas that we need to work on. You know, we've talked a lot about hearing the voices. And if you want to hear the voices, you need to make sure that their vote counts. Right now, if somebody in one of those director areas wants a particular individual, they can be overridden by the citizens that live in the other 4 director areas. Does that seem fair to you? Didn't seem fair to me. So I think those are some things we need to think about as we move forward. And I think our attorney misspoke when he said at large, but so we need to get the people in the room, the experts, and have them draw some pictures for us so we can see that. And that's why I stand behind and support this amendment to table us and get people in here. And if we have to have more meetings, let's have more meetings. You know, it's, as Director Anderson said, you know, it wasn't us that dilly-dallied. We've dilly-dallied when we could have done some other things. And certainly what Director Anderson said, that little subset of area that was part of Bethel that's now belongs to us, it could be an exception to rule. It can be like a remainder or whatever you carry forward. You know, I think we do math. We should be able to do math. We're a school district. So anyhow, that's what we need to do. We need to have this discussion, and we need to have a discussion in public, and so that it's transparent. And I think there's a lot of issues that with this where we are right now that aren't very transparent. So thank you.
I think we'll just go to the vote at this time. Yeah. So there is an amended motion on the floor to table 22-231 draft plan for redistricting of internal director districts. So to clarify, if you vote yes, you are voting to table it. If you vote no, you are voting to continue on with the draft plan for redistricting tonight. So Carmen, would you please do Carol Jacobs?
No.
Anthony July?
No.
David Anderson?
Yes.
Paul Wagman?
Yes.
Alyssa Anderson Pearson? No. We have 3 no's, so the motion does not carry. Okay. So we are going to go back to the original individual action item that's on the table. There was already a motion and there was a second. We've had extensive discussion, but if anyone wants to discuss further why you're for or against the motion, this would be your time. Okay, so if you vote for this, yes means you vote for option 3. And if you vote no, you're not voting for nothing. Anthony Velez?
Yes.
David Anderson?
No.
Paul Wagman?
No.
Carol Jacobs?
Yes.
Alyssa Anderson Pearson? Yes. So we have 3 yeses, so yes for option 3. Okay, our next quick discussion would be, oh wait, hold on. Do you have a report tonight? Okay. So no reports for the superintendent, and then the General Assembly feedback process for legislative representative voting. I'm going to hand this off to Anthony. It was suggested at the last meeting that some of the votes didn't recommend or didn't reflect what the board thought as a whole. And so we tried to come up with a solution to fix that. So Anthony.
Good evening. Last week I met with Superintendent Ron Banner.
Point of order. A special meeting is for one topic.
It's not, it's whatever is on the.
Read the RTW. It is for one topic of discussion.
Parker, could you help us out here?
Yeah, the special under the OPMA, the Public Meetings Act, you can talk about more than one point during a meeting. You just have to notify by sending notice to the news media who've signed up for it, posting on your website, etc. I do know the agenda on the website had more on it than just that item, but
yes, this is it's on the item. Thank you. Okay, so Anthony, please continue on.
Thank you. So briefly, last week, Superintendent Ron Banner and we met and we had further discussion, and there was an opportunity for us to create a draft with the different positions that represent in our meeting for the legislation. And what we will do is have a vote on each position, and that will allow the board to come to an agreement of one voice of how to vote for each position.
Yep. Yeah, so to clarify, it's a yes or no. So you go through all of the items. If you don't want to do one, I guess leave it blank. But go through, say yes or no. It will be tallied up. If there's 3 yeses, Anthony will vote on that. If there's 3 no's, that's how we will vote. So then there should be no confusion.
Will he be taking our top 10 down with him?
Well, at the General Assembly, I think they vote on all of them, and then that's how it comes to be. Yeah, he votes on all of them.
The process says, and Director Velez and I discussed it, in order to support each individual board director, as well as the voice of the board. If you see the draft that's in your binder and was sent to you in a packet last Friday, each director labeled by director district would be able to say a yes or a no. You would have the packet you can review. You can then send what you want, what your words are, or your vote to Carmen. She would collate that. And then you would have a document going into each General Assembly that is a voice of the board. The ledge rep would basically not be able to make a mistake. They would just vote down the line that the board indicated. And we believed in our conversation that would support what the concerns were going into the General Assembly. And Director Velez, I'm hoping I captured our conversation correctly.
Yes, that's correct. And I think that will help with any miscommunications on voting and how the General Assembly was handled.
That's correct.
So at the General Assembly, what happens if there's an amended motion? How do we handle that?
Probably the same way you handled it, the best to your ability. That's what we have. Is that when you were the ledge rep, that's what we trusted, that you would vote for with the best of your ability with the rest of the board in mind. And I expect the same from Anthony.
Absolutely. And that will be my approach.
So then will we get a record back of how we voted plus the amendments?
Yeah, if there's an amendment, can you just make a note of it that it was amended?
Absolutely.
Okay. There we go.
Thank you.
Due date for this?
Is there a consensus? I guess what I need in order to proceed is that there's a consensus of the board to move in this direction, and then we would work through our office to get this out to you guys with a date to get it back so that the ledge rep has it with enough time to go into the General Assembly.
So I would make a motion that this be accepted as the plan moving forward for legislative recommendations.
Second.
Okay, so there's a motion on the board to accept the proposed feedback process that was sent out to board directors. So Carmen, could you please do a roll call?
Yes. Asian Anderson.
Yes.
Paul Wegman.
All right.
Carol Jacobs.
Yes.
Anthony Velez.
Yes.
And Alyssa Anderson Pearson.
Yes.
Okay, we have 5, so that does pass.
I just have a related question. When do we need this back by?
That was what Superintendent Banner said. They're going to come put it all together to send it out, and then they'll give us a date when they need it back by.
We'll push that out by Friday packet. That information you just requested, we'll have out by Friday packet.
So that is the end of our special meeting. Well, we have an executive session to discuss bargaining. maybe 30 minutes, so we expect to be back at 7:30 or more. So All right, we just need 3, so. All right, we are back from executive session. It is 7:32. Is there a motion to adjourn? So moved by Director Jacob, seconded, is there a second? Seconded by Director Velez. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. And we will
Thank you.
adjourn at 7:32.
So